Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another happy hour video and a live sale. I'm your host and the communication specialist here at AfterShock Comics, RuthAnn Thompson. So this will be a little bit different, but I am so excited to have our guest on. We've been trying to get him on here for a while. He is a comic book writer who first got on the map with his self-published crime series, Murder Book. He is now the creator of AfterShock title Beyond the Breach and his newest series with us, There's Something Wrong with Patrick Todd. Say hello to Ed Brisson. Hello, Ed. How are you?
Doing great. And you?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know the schedules are crazy with all these different cons going on, so I greatly appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, not a problem.
And we always love to ask our creatives whenever we bring them on because we'd love to hear about like what first sparked you to get into this industry. So, what was the first comic book or movie or TV experience that you just remember thinking, you know what? I want to do this and I'm going to make this my career?
I think it was, I don't know exactly the first comic, but I know when I first started reading comics was, I think when I was in the hospital when I was a kid, and, which seemed to be a thing in the 80s, people would just bring you stacks of comic books to read. But the first one that really stuck out with me was the first two that I read religiously was a Canadian comic book series called Captain Canuck. And then I was a really big fan of Peter Porker, the Spectacular Spider-Ham. Those were my entry comics, the things that got me into it. What really got me hooked and made me want to sort of write comics was probably Craven's Last Hunt, which was a Spider-Man series from the later 80s.
Well, and now how does it feel now that you're also writing for Marvel and all these other the big two? Like how has that been for you after, being a kid and reading these books growing up?
Yeah, it's great. It's you're kind of living the dream. Originally I wanted to be a comic book artist, but I switched over and became a writer instead. But yeah, it's pretty great. It's a great job, good hours. Sometimes can be all hours, but it's pretty good. I enjoy it.
Well, yeah, and let's talk about that switchover. So your first drive was to be an artist and storytell that way. So what kind of led you from being an artist on that side to then being a storyteller with words alone?
I started out writing only because back in the 90s, I wanted to draw comics and didn't have access to writers. I didn't know any writers. The internet wasn't what it is today. And so I just started writing comics to draw. And, after high school, I went through fine arts to sort of hone my art skills. And I did write and draw and self-publish comics from 1994 until about 2010. And then I just realized in 2010 that I don't like drawing at all. Like I find it an incredibly frustrating process. And like my hat's off to anyone who can do it and stick with it. But I got really frustrated, and I found with the writing side that when I was writing and drawing my own stories, I was getting so far ahead of myself with the art. I'd be drawing page 2 of issue 1 and already writing issue 10 in my head. And so I sort of decided to just switch gears and go with the thing that I was enjoying more and just focus on the writing back in that was about 2010. And I started doing the series Murder Book, which was a bunch of short crime black and white stories that I would team up with different artists and just publish for free online, and did that for about 3 years, I think, before I got discovered, I guess.
Yeah, that's so great. And as you said, things have changed a lot since you first started, writing and drawing. For anybody who's trying to come up now as a, up and comer in the industry, either for writing or for artistry, do you have any suggestions for them or something that you wish somebody told you when you were coming up in the industry?
I think the thing that worked for me, which is, I guess, the best advice I can give. There's obviously not a one size fits all solution, but for the writing side of things, I would advise people to do short comics, like 5 pages max. When for the first few comics, 5 pages max, because you see a lot of people who come out and they want to write like a 200 issue epic, and it's just not feasible. It's just not really going to happen for your first project. And even if it did, you're going to hate the beginning because you're learning as you go along. So start with a bunch of 5 page stories that have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then slowly sort of expand from there. With artists, it's really just a matter of like doing the work, putting your work online, and sort of trying to get in touch with other professionals and get feedback, and take that, like, don't argue that feedback, just take it. and really dwell upon it and think about it. When I was in fine arts, there was this thing that we used to do where we would, one class, have to put up a piece of art and sit back while everyone in our class got to critique it. And we couldn't defend the art. We couldn't argue any of the critiques. And we had to just sit with it. That was the thing. And I think that's like an important thing, because your gut instinct is to defend what you're doing, and you're not really processing the criticism. So just taking it and really process it, and sort of develop, listen when they say you need to work on anatomy or perspective, or you need to learn how to draw boring things like couches and that sort of stuff. And just keep working at it.
That's amazing because that's advice that we haven't heard yet. We have a lot of creatives on here, a lot of writers, a lot of artists, and that's something. Both of those notes are really amazing because, yeah, when it comes to especially comic book writing, you're going to be working with a writer, an editor, and all these people that you kind of have to actually listen to and take notes without getting too defensive or personal about it.
Sure, and that's not saying for all your life to just do everything that anyone says, but just really, I think, taking the time to process the critiques before sort of arguing back. I've done portfolio critiques where like the perspective was off, and had people argue back that that's just their style. But like, just bad perspective isn't a style; it's just bad perspective. Yeah, so I think just processing that, and then really sort of figuring out your own voice and your own style, and then later on you can push back. But when you're starting out, you just want to sort of absorb all the advice you can get.
All right, well, I've been so excited to talk to you because now you have two titles with us here at AfterShock. So let's start with the first title you did with us, which is Beyond the Breach, about a young woman who started off a road trip because she's having one of the worst times of her life, and then everything goes to heck, as it were. So tell us a little bit about this story and where it came from for you.
So this story actually kind of came from a road trip that I was supposed to do in 2020, but obviously COVID hit, and it didn't happen. So the very like sort of cheap version of it is that it's like it is sort of a COVID allegory. Not really, but it's mostly I was just mad I couldn't go on this road trip, and so decided to write sort of a road trip from hell story. And part of what we just wanted to do when we developed it, Damien and I, was that we wanted to do something that like felt like she was thrown into a different world, which obviously the breach happens, the sort of skies open up, and multiple dimensions are sort of plopped into our own, or drug into our own, not fully formed, but parts of them are pulled into. And we wanted to do a thing where like this happened globally. She happened to be at the epicenter of it, but it happened globally. So as she moves around, the sort of strange creatures or fauna and flora that she's going to run into will change. So it's almost like by traveling across the US and Canada, she's almost hitting like different, it's like she's going to different planets along the way, through each region. And we just thought that would be a fun thing to sort of build on as she finds herself trapped in this. Well, she was driving through the redwoods in California when the breach happens. It's like an EMP almost goes off, so all electronics stop working, all cars stop working, so you're left basically to walk or to cycle. And so she has to make her way from California across to Halifax, where I live now, which walking that, I believe it's like a three-month walk or something like that. It's quite a trek. And so we thought it would be fun to have her, have these sort of mini adventures on the way. And the first arc is largely her trying to get a young boy home to his grandparents. His parents unfortunately got killed when the breach happened. She's sort of trying to hide that from him because she doesn't have the sort of capacity to have that sort of discussion with a young boy that his parents have brutally been killed by interdimensional creatures. And so her thing is she just, at least the least she can do for him is bring him home to Twin Falls, Idaho. So that's largely the first arc, is they're trying to get there. Many hurdles thrown in their way. They're being hunted by sort of these interdimensional bounty hunters that's after a particular person that she's also traveling with. There's a giant turtle or a giant tortoise named Turtle in there. That is great and a lot of fun to write. And that's it. It's just like a weird sort of sci-fi road trip book.
Yeah, it's funny hearing you talk about it now and talk about like the EMP style of like all the electronic stuff working. It kind of reminds me of what we thought was going to happen for Y2K.
Oh
Like
yeah,
we're so sure it was going to be like this crazy event that would destroy everything. But and tell me a little bit about the characters and your inspirations for them because I love every single one of them, but especially like you were talking about this kind of interdimensional wizard type guy who can't tell at first if he's there for good or if he's the bad
right.
guy and like that kind of dichotomy.
So Samuel, I don't know. I don't know how much I want to spoil for the
Yeah.
series, so I won't give too much away about him. But Samuel's the one who's being hunted by these interdimensional bounty hunters. He's the one who rides around on tortoise or turtle, sort of this oversized tortoise. He saves Vanessa, our main protagonist, and Dougie, early in the series, and sort of helps guide them along to get them back home to Twin Falls. But yeah, there's a lot of secrets with this guy. He tells her one story, and then she starts sort of peeling back the layers. She finds out it's not necessarily true, but we don't know necessarily if it's nefarious at first until we go along. And this is me trying to dodge any sort of spoilers. But he was a lot of fun to write. He's a dude who's been through some things. He's dealing with some things, and he's just trying to, in his own way, sort of fix things as much as he can, even if the world now is sort of beyond fixing. And then the other character, our protagonist, is Vanessa, who, as you mentioned, was having like a terrible time. Her mom passed away from cancer. She found out after her mom passed away from cancer that her sister had also been sleeping with her boyfriend. So it's all like very soap opera-y, like worst year ever stuff that she was escaping. And she'd actually booked this whole trip on her ex-boyfriend's credit cards without him knowing. So she's pretty. She can be pretty intense at times, but her heart is definitely in the right place. She's trying to help this young boy, trying to give him some sort of semblance of a life, or bring him back to some sort of semblance of his life before, even though with the breach, nothing is ever the same anymore.
Yeah, and you had mentioned earlier working with Damien Cosiero on doing this project because you've worked together before on Old Man Logan. So, what was it like working with him and kind of having these ideas that you both are coming up together to then see them on the page?
So Damien and I have been working together since about 2005, I think. He and I, he's the first artist I ever sort of teamed up with to pitch books back in the day. We pitched a bunch of stuff. We've done, I don't know, I want to say we've probably done over 1,000 pages worth of work together at this point. I think he and I have very similar sort of ideas and stories we really like, sort of similar aesthetics. And so this was a story that I just hit him up. We were trying to figure out a project to pitch. I hit him up with this idea. He wanted to do something horror based, and I had this idea. So we just sort of talked it out, and he started designing some stuff. And then we just sort of started putting this story together. Like we would chat a lot through Messenger and sort of figure out what direction. He had a lot of input. He did so much incredible design work. We had done years ago a book called Cluster, which was a sci-fi sort of a space book, and his aliens in there were just so incredible that I just wanted, and his environmental design was so incredible that I just really wanted to exploit that as much as possible on here, and throw as much of that good stuff into this series as possible. So yeah, he's a great guy. We work together all the time. He's until the day I die, I'll hopefully be working with Damien.
Yeah, and in this you have a lot of amazing designs and creatures and that kind of stuff. Did you have any favorites of like either the creatures or like specific panels of like the kind of worlds, like you said, the kind of crossover into ours that Damien did?
So I really like his design for Turtle, the oversized tortoise. I thought his design for Kai, which is this weird like fuzzball alien who tags along with him, was a lot of fun. Yeah, the thing I really like is that his designs, like each area that they go to, they feel so unique. Like the creatures we see at the beginning, whose names I won't repeat on here, but you know, them versus say like the giants that we come across a little bit later in this series, they're so uniquely different that they feel like they're from different worlds, which is great. Which is the thing that I love that Damien is able to do. Each time they encounter any new set of creatures that are legitimately from different dimensions, they feel that way. They don't feel like they're all just a bunch of creatures pulled from the same place. They're all uniquely designed. They're all beautiful. But Kai and Turtle are my favorite too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that is obviously, as we talked about, as has come out, it is available both in single issues and trades, and we'll have a special sale for you guys at the end of this interview, so stick around. But before that, let's talk about your brand new title with us. So instead of focusing on a very troubled young woman, we are focused on a very troubled young teenage boy in There's Something Wrong with Patrick Todd. So it's a very, one of those moral quandary situations. So I'd love to hear your description of this title of the first two issues that we have out.
Yeah. So the short of it is, Patrick Todd can sort of telepathically pilot or control people. He can make them do what he wants them to do, and he makes bad people do bad things. So usually what he does is get bad people to rob banks, hand the money over to him, and then go turn themselves into the police to confess for the bank robbery that they just did, as well as any of their other crimes. And he is taking the money and using it to pay for his mom, who is in a care facility and needs a very expensive sort of 24-hour care for an Alzheimer's like disease that they haven't been able to really sort of figure out what it is. And so he's trying to save money, not just pay for the care facility, but also to get her in with specialists so he can hopefully figure out what's going on with his mom and maybe cure him. But he's 15. He's not he's not going to school anymore. He's never known his father, so he has no parental sort of supervision. So he's just like bouncing around from motel to motel, living in motels, trying to stay away from children's services or stay away from whoever. And yeah, and just sort of existing, doing these things repeatedly. But he's 15, which is sort of the age where we learn empathy early on in life, and then sort of in our teen years we sort of lose it and almost have to relearn it. And so I really thought it was interesting to do this story, like almost like a study on a 15-year-old who's at that point where he has to relearn empathy, but also like can just get anything he wants by making people do what he wants. So it's hard to develop any empathy when you don't have to, and it feels like he doesn't have to. And so this is sort of, we're gonna sort of follow him along and see how this sort of pans out. In addition to everything he's been doing, because of everything he's been doing, the police are after him right now, so he's got to deal with that. And now there's a psychopath named Zeus who is after him for as of yet unknown reasons. But Zeus has a bad habit of chopping people's heads off and carrying them around in a bag. So he's not someone you want to find you.
Yeah, and where did you come up with some of the inspirations of this? Because, like, to me, like I kind of get a vibe of almost a young Kilgrave when it comes to Patrick Todd, but not quite as dark as that. But this is a pretty intense story and intense characters. Like for you, where did the inspiration? I know you mentioned about just the adolescence and dealing with being a more connected human and having that sort of empathy. But like beyond that, it's such a fascinating story.
Honestly, I don't remember. I just remember sitting down one day I was just sitting down one day trying to come up with like new story ideas, and it started quite different, the thought process behind it, and it sort of evolved into this. But it's one of those ideas that sort of like sprung into my head one day and sort of sat around there for about a year while I tried to figure out how to make it all work, and where it would fit, and what artists to sort of approach to work on it and what will be a good fit. So yeah, I couldn't say. It's just kind of there always.
That's amazing. It's an incredible story. And for you now, you're not working with Damien on this one. You're working with Gavin Gowdry, and I think this is the first time you've been working with him. So what has it been like working with him as the artist on this title?
Yeah, so Gavin is a guy, I met him in 2017 at Heroes Con. We were sitting just a few tables away from each other. We got chatting a lot then. And I always really liked his art. And I approached him with this idea, and he was into it. I think he's an incredible artist. He brings a lot of really cool stuff to the table. He's got like the way that he draws Patrick Todd. I think he does such a great job of like riding that line of this, of reminding you that he's a kid, but also that he's like kind of can be an evil bastard. And I think, yeah, Gavin just has this beautifully clean art style that I just love to look at. And he and I, we get along quite well, which always helps. We chat quite a bit back and forth about things when I'm working on them. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to work with, and hoping that this is not the last time he and I get to work together.
Yeah, absolutely. And we only have the first two issues out so far, but is there any favorite scenes or characters or panels that he's done for you so far that you're like, oh, it's exactly what I was picturing when I wrote it?
So there's a lot, but there's one that I just keep thinking about, and it's in issue 3, so people have to pick up the next issue to see it. But there's a chase scene. I won't even say who between, but there's a chase scene. I'll say Patrick's running from someone, and the way that the scene is paced and parceled out is just absolutely beautiful. It's just such a work of art. So right now, that's sort of my favorite sequence across the books. That, and then also the reveal of Zeus at the end of issue 1 is actually pretty great too.
Yeah, that was pretty intense. Well, issue 3, which has that chase scene, will be in stores on September 14th. So make sure you add that to your pull list. So until then, where can everybody find you on social media to follow your next projects?
You can find me on Twitter, just at Ed Brisson. That's probably the best place. I also do have a newsletter. So if you go to edbrisson.substack.com, you can find my newsletter there and subscribe to it. And I'll often send a lot of previews of books out through my newsletter. Sometimes I'll send some older comics that I've done for free through the newsletter as well. And I'll constantly update people on what I'm working on through the newsletter.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much again for joining us. It was such a pleasure to talk to you and be able
No,
to hear
thank you.
all the inspirations behind all of this. So thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
And for everybody else out there, make sure you go follow Ed Brisson and stick around because we're going to have some sale items for you guys coming right up. All right, folks, it is time for the world famous AfterShock live sale. So even though this is pre-recorded, the live items are now ready to be added to your cart as we speak. So starting with the Mike Ruth Happy Hour exclusive variant of There's Something Wrong with Patrick Todd issue 1. We're doing these for only $10 and there's only 100 available this time. So make sure you add these to your cart as soon as you can. And as always, it's just such a pleasure to work with Mike Ruth. And this is a perfect way for you to pick up issue 1 before you pick up issue 2 and 3, starting on September 14th. And next up, we also have the Andrea Muti C2E2 exclusive variant of There's Something Wrong with Patrick Todd issue 1, which again, there's just nothing better than Andrea Muti's like very terrifying watercolored covers that he does for us. These are also $10, but there's only 30 available left because we almost sold out completely at this last C2E2 just a few weeks ago. And we also have Beyond the Breach, a bundle for you of issues 1 through 5, plus the incentive cover. And we're doing this for only $20 total, but there are only 20 available of these. So make sure you add these to your cart as soon as possible. And if you want to just be able to get the full story in one beautiful trade paperback of Beyond the Breach, we will be doing the trade paperback at the low price of $10 also for the next 24 hours. And there's only 30 of these available as well. So make sure that you add these all to your cart as soon as possible. And it's just been such a pleasure to have these shows with all of you. So make sure that you keep following us on social media and we'll have even more video content for you.